Did you know? Elvis Presley's most overlooked gems are hiding in plain sight. Ever wondered why some of Elvis's greatest performances never made it to his major albums? Number 15, I'll Be Back, from Elvis Sings Flaming Star. Ever heard an Elvis song that literally gives you goosebumps from the first note? That's exactly what happens with I'll Be Back, a haunting track buried on the budget Camden release. Elvis Sings Flaming Star, from 1969. This song wasn't just any throwaway track. It was initially recorded for his 1966 movie Spin-Out, but got cut from the final film soundtrack. When RCA decided to compile songs for this budget album, they rescued this incredible performance from obscurity. The song begins with a gentle guitar intro before Elvis's voice enters with a vulnerability rarely heard in his more commercial releases. What makes this track so special is how Elvis delivers the lyrics about returning to a lover with such sincerity that you can almost feel his heart breaking. The thinnest of production lets his voice take center stage, proving that sometimes less truly is more. What's fascinating about I'll Be Back is how it represents a side of Elvis that casual fans rarely encounter. While the world was dancing to Jailhouse Rock and Hound Dog, this quieter, more introspective Elvis was hiding on bargain bin albums that cost less than half the price of his regular releases. Camden albums like Flaming Star sold for just $1.98 when they were released, making them accessible to fans who couldn't afford his premium releases. Elvis historian Ernst Jorgensen once noted that many Camden releases contain performances equal to or better than those on Elvis's major albums, with I'll Be Back being prime evidence. The song sings Elvis's incredible range as a vocalist, from gentle whispers to powerful crescendos that demonstrate why he earned the title The King. Number 14. Finders, Keepers, Losers, Weepers, from You'll Never Walk Alone. Have you ever discovered a song so catchy you couldn't believe it wasn't a major hit? When RCA Camden released You'll Never Walk Alone in 1971, few expected to find a hidden up-tempo gem like Finders, Keepers, Losers, Weepers tucked away on its grooves. This energetic track had been originally recorded during the sessions for the film Love in Las Vegas, but remained unreleased until this budget compilation came along. Elvis attacks this song with remarkable enthusiasm, backed by the stellar Jordanaires who provide perfect harmonies that complement his lead vocal. The production is surprisingly rich for a budget release, featuring a driving beat and infectious saxophone riff that burrows into your brain. What's most impressive is how fresh Elvis sounds here. There's none of the weariness that occasionally marked his movie recordings. Camden albums occupied a curious place in Elvis's discography. They weren't considered important releases by RCA, who often assembled them from leftover tracks, alternate takes, and movie songs to satisfy the constant demand for Elvis product. Yet ironically, this commercial afterthought status meant these albums sometimes contained more authentic Elvis performances than his carefully calculated mainstream releases. Music journalist Grail Marcus once observed that Elvis's Camden albums revealed the artist behind the icon, and nowhere is this more evident than on Finders, Keepers, Losers, Weepers, where Elvis seems liberated from commercial expectations. The song's lyrics about holding on to love at all costs take on added poignancy when you consider Elvis's tumultuous romantic history, making this throwaway track a surprisingly personal statement from an artist often hidden behind a carefully managed image. Number 13. Forget Me Never, from Separate Ways. Can a single song capture both heartbreak and hope? When Camden released Separate Ways in 1973, few noticed the extraordinary emotional depth of Forget Me Never, a ballad, tucked away as the album's closing track. Elvis recorded this song during the same sessions that produced his hit Always on My Mind. Yet while that track became legendary, Forget Me Never remained in relative obscurity. The song's power comes from Elvis's remarkably nuanced vocal performance. Beginning with a gentle, almost spoken-word delivery, he gradually builds to an emotional crescendo that shows his remarkable control and range. What's particularly striking is how his voice breaks slightly on key phrases, not from technical inability, but as a deliberate artistic choice to convey emotional vulnerability. This recording came during a difficult period in Elvis's life. His separation from Priscilla was wreaking emotional havoc, and many critics believe you can hear that personal pain in performances like this one. The song's lyrics about eternal devotion despite separation take on added significance when viewed through the lens of Elvis's crumbling marriage. Camden albums like Separate Ways held a unique place in Elvis's catalog. Priced at just $2.98 when standard albums cost $5.98, they made Elvis's music accessible to working-class fans who couldn't afford his regular releases. This democratic approach to music distribution meant that some of Elvis's most honest, emotionally raw performances reached listeners who might otherwise have missed them. Legendary record producer Jim Dickinson once remarked that Elvis's Camden recordings were where the real Elvis sometimes slipped through the corporate machinery, and Forget Me Never stands as compelling evidence of that theory. Free from the pressure of creating a chart-topping hit, Elvis delivers a performance of startling intimacy and emotional truth. Number 12, 100 Years From Now. From Elvis's Golden Records, Volume 4. What if Elvis's most authentic country performance was hiding on a budget compilation? Despite its title suggesting a greatest hits package, 1968's Elvis's Golden Records, Volume 4 was actually a Camden budget release containing several overlooked tracks, including the remarkable 100 Years From Now. Originally recorded for his 1957 film, Loving You, but left on the cutting room floor, this song sinks Elvis's deep connection to country music roots. The track opens with a simple, classic country arrangement, featuring steel guitar and a walking bass line before Elvis enters with a vocal that pays clear homage to the Hank Williams tradition. What makes this performance special is how effortlessly Elvis inhabits the country idiom. There's no hint of the rock and roll wildman or the Vegas showman here, just a Tennessee boy honoring the music he grew up with. RCA's decision to include this track on a budget Camden release rather than a major album speaks volumes about how the label sometimes undervalued Elvis's more traditional country performances. While his rock innovations and pop ballads received prime placement on major releases, equally strong country tracks were often relegated to compilations like this one. Country music historian Colin S. Scott once wrote that 100 Years From Now represented Elvis as he might have developed had Sun Records kept him, a fascinating glimpse at an alternate career path that emphasized his rural Southern roots over his more commercial dimension. The song's lyrics about lasting love take on added dimension when delivered by a young man who would later struggle so publicly with loneliness and isolation. What's particularly fascinating about this track is the timing of its wider release on this Camden album. It appeared in 1968, the same year as Elvis's famous Comeback Special, when he was actively working to reclaim his musical legacy from years of mediocre movies. This song, recorded over a decade earlier, served as a reminder of the authentic artist who existed before Hollywood's influences. Number 11. If I'm a Fool, for Loving You from Let's Be Friends. Is it possible for a song to be both overlooked and exceptional? When Camden released Let's Be Friends in 1970, it seemed like just another budget compilation of movie songs. Hidden in its grooves was the stunning If I'm a Fool for Loving You, a track originally recorded for Elvis's film Girl Happy, but inexplicably left off the soundtrack album. What immediately strikes listeners about this song is the quality of Elvis's vocal performance. He delivers the romantic lyrics with a combination of vulnerability and confidence that perfectly captures the song's emotional core. The arrangement, featuring a tasteful string section and subtle backing vocals, provides the perfect backdrop for Elvis to showcase his remarkable interpretive abilities. Camden albums occupied a strange place in Elvis's discography. While major releases received extensive promotion and prime retail placement, these budget compilations were often found in discount bins and drugstore racks. This commercial afterthought status meant that casual fans often missed exceptional performances like this one, creating a divide between the Elvis known to dedicated collectors and the one familiar to the general public. Elvis biographer Peter Grunik once noted that tracks like If I'm a Fool revealed the soul of an artist often obscured by his own iconography. A performer more nuanced and emotionally complex than his public image suggested. The song's exploration of foolish devotion seems especially poignant coming from a man whose relationships would be marked by complicated power dynamics and emotional turbulence. What makes this track particularly special is how it bridges the gap between Elvis's various musical personages. It has the sincerity of his gospel recordings, the emotional directness of his ballads, and hints of the country phrasing that informed his earliest work. In just over 2 minutes, it provides a remarkably complete picture of Elvis's artistry. Despite being relegated to a budget release, many fans overlooked entirely. Number 10. Echoes of Love from Almost in Love. Have you ever discovered a song so beautiful, it seems impossible it remained obscure? That's the case with Echoes of Love, a Donau track from the 1970 Camden release, Almost in Love. Originally recorded for his 1968 film, Live a Little, Love a Little, this ballad shinkers Elvis at perhaps the most interesting transition point in his career, between his Hollywood years and his 1968 comeback. The song begins with a sweeping orchestral introduction before Elvis enters with one of his most controlled, mature vocal performances. What makes this track remarkable is how it demonstrates Elvis's growth as a vocalist. There's a newfound depth and nuance to his interpretation that transcends the limitations of typical movie material. The arrangement, featuring tasteful strings and subtle backing vocals, creates an atmosphere of romantic melancholy that perfectly complements the lyrics about lingering memories of love. Camden albums, like Almost in Love, represented a curious paradox in Elvis's career. While they often contained superior performances, their budget status, typically selling for $1.98 to $2.98, meant they were perceived as less important than his regular releases. This commercial segregation created two parallel Elvis catalogs: the mainstream releases known to everyone, and these budget treasures familiar mainly to dedicated fans. Music critic Dave Marsh once observed that Elvis's Camden recordings sometimes revealed a more thoughtful artist than his hit singles suggested, and Echoes of Love stands as compelling evidence. Free from the pressure of creating an immediate chart success, Elvis seems more willing to explore emotional nuance and vocal subtlety. The timing of this song's release, on Almost in Love, is particularly interesting. It appeared in 1970, just as Elvis was beginning his return to live performance and establishing himself as a Vegas showman. While his concerts increasingly emphasized bombastic performances and theatrical excess, this quiet, introspective recording served as a reminder of the sensitive interpreter who could convey complex emotions. Number 9. This Is My Heaven, from Elvis Sings Hits from His Movies, Volume 1. Can a movie song transcend its origins and become something truly special? That's exactly what happened with This Is My Heaven, a hidden gem buried on the 1972 Camden release. Elvis Sings His from His Movies, Volume 1. Despite the album title suggesting familiar fare, this track was actually a relative obscurity from Elvis's 1965 film Tickle Me. Finally getting wider exposure through this budget compilation. From the opening notes, it's clear this isn't just typical movie filler. Elvis delivers a vocal performance of remarkable commitment and authenticity, investing the somewhat standard lyrics about finding paradise in a lover's arms with genuine emotional weight. The arrangement supports him perfectly, with a gospel-influenced piano part and tasteful backing vocals that create a warm, intimate atmosphere. What makes Camden releases like this particularly interesting is how they often repurposed and recontextualized Elvis's work. Songs that originally appeared in lightweight films suddenly gained new significance when presented as standalone musical works, rather than movie soundtrack elements. This Is My Heaven benefits tremendously from this separation from its film origins, allowing listeners to appreciate its musical qualities without the distraction of its original context. Elvis historian Ernst Jorgensen has noted that Camden albums served an important function in keeping Elvis's catalog accessible to fans of all economic backgrounds. While his regular RCA releases commanded premium prices, these budget compilations ensured that even listeners with limited resources could build an Elvis collection. This democratic approach meant that songs like This Is My Heaven reached audiences who might never have heard them otherwise. The song's gospel influences are particularly worth noting, as they connect to an essential aspect of Elvis's musical identity often underrepresented in his commercial releases. Raised in the Pentecostal church, Elvis's spiritual foundations informed even his secular recordings, and This Is My Heaven demonstrates how he could transform seemingly conventional love songs into expressions of almost religious devotion, a quality that set him apart from many of his contemporaries. Number 8. Follow That Dream, from Elvis Sings Flaming Star. Would you believe one of Elvis's most inspiring performances was buried on a budget album? The title track from his 1962 film Follow That Dream found new life when included on the Camden release Elvis Sings Flaming Star in 1969. While originally composed for a lighthearted movie, the song takes on almost philosophical dimensions through Elvis's committed performance. What immediately stands out is the unusual structure of this song. Rather than a standard verse-chorus format, it builds progressively with each section growing more emphatic, mirroring the lyrical message about perseverance and belief. Elvis seems particularly connected to this material, delivering the inspirational lyrics with a conviction that transcends the song's movie origins. Camden albums like Flaming Star served a unique purpose in Elvis's discography. Priced significantly below his standard releases, they made his music available to fans who couldn't afford his regular albums. This democratization of access meant that performances like Follow That Dream reached listeners who might otherwise have missed them entirely, including younger fans and those with limited disposable income. The timing of this track's appearance on Elvis Sings Flaming Star creates an interesting historical resonance. Released in 1969, just after Elvis's a successful comeback and return to live performing, its message about pursuing dreams despite obstacles seems almost autobiographical in retrospect. After years of career stagnation in Hollywood, Elvis had indeed followed his own dream back to the concert stage. Producer Sam Phillips, who discovered Elvis, once remarked that Elvis's most spiritual quality was his ability to make listeners believe in possibility. And nowhere is this more evident than on Follow That Dream. The song's message, about maintaining faith in your path despite setbacks, takes on added poignancy coming from a performer who experienced both spectacular triumphs and painful disappointments throughout his career. Number 7. Stay Away, from Come On Everybody. Have you ever heard a song that completely contradicts an artist's public image? That's what makes Stay Away so fascinating. A dark, brooding track hidden on the 1971 Camden release, Come On Everybody. Originally recorded for his 1968 film Stay Away, Joe, but omitted from the original soundtrack album, this moody, atmospheric song reveals a complexity to Elvis rarely seen in his more commercial releases. The track opens with an ominous guitar figure before Elvis enters, with one of his most intense vocal performances. What makes this recording so striking is its emotional ambiguity. The lyrics ostensibly tell a lover to stay away, but Elvis delivers them with such conflicted emotion that listeners sense he wants exactly the opposite. This psychological complexity elevates what could have been a standard pop song into something far more interesting. Camden albums occupied a curious position in Elvis's catalog. Their budget status meant they were often assembled without the careful curation of his major releases, sometimes resulting in fascinating juxtapositions and unexpected treasures. Come On Everybody perfectly illustrates this phenomenon. Its title suggests light-hearted party music, yet it contains this remarkably dark, introspective performance. Music critic Grail Marcus once wrote that Elvis's greatest gift was his ability to convey emotional contradictions, and Stay Away stands as compelling evidence. Throughout the track, Elvis alternates between pushing someone away and desperately wanting connection, creating a tension that reflects universal human struggles with intimacy and vulnerability. What makes this song's inclusion on a budget Camden release particularly interesting is how it contrasts with Elvis's carefully managed public image. While his publicists promoted him as either a wholesome entertainer or a hip-swinging rebel, songs like Stay Away revealed a more complex artist dealing with the same emotional conflicts and uncertainties as his listeners, creating a connection far more meaningful than his carefully constructed personage. Number 6. Violet, Flower of New York, from Frankie and Johnny. Did you know Elvis once recorded a delightful period piece set in the 1890s? When the Camden album Frankie and Johnny was released in 1970, few recognized the charm of Violet, Flower of New York, a song originally featured in the 1966 film of the same name, but given new exposure through this budget compilation. What makes this track so special is how completely Elvis commits to its ragtime era aesthetic. Backed by a whimsical arrangement featuring honky-tonk, piano, and banjo, Elvis adopts a playful, almost theatrical vocal approach that demonstrates his versatility as a performer. His delivery of lines about courting a college girl in the gay 90s era shows his underappreciated talent for character-based performances. Camden albums, like Frankie and Johnny, played an important role in keeping Elvis's less commercial work available to fans. While his major releases increasingly focused on contemporary material that could generate hit singles, these budget compilations preserve performances that coquette different facets of his artistry, including period pieces like Violet that might otherwise have disappeared into obscurity. Elvis historian Alana Nash has noted that songs like Violet reveal Elvis's often overlooked sense of humor and willingness to step outside his established persona. While public perception often focused on his sexuality or later his excess, tracks like this demonstrate a playful, almost innocent quality that represented an equally authentic aspect of his personality. The historical setting of Violet creates an interesting parallel with Elvis's own place in music history. Just as the song nostalgically looks back to an earlier era, its appearance on a 1970 Camden release invited listeners to look back at Elvis's film career from the vantage point of his post-comeback period, a memory on nostalgia that adds another layer of interest to this charming performance. Number 5. Sing You Children, from Let's Be Friends. What happens when a simple children's song becomes something profound? That's the transformation that occurs in Sing You Children, a remarkable track hidden on the 1970 Camden release, Let's Be Friends. Originally recorded for Elvis's 1969 film, The Trouble with Girls, this song transcends its movie origins through the sheer emotional commitment of Elvis's performance. The song begins with a gentle, almost lullaby-like quality, as Elvis invites children to join in harmony and brotherhood. What makes this recording special is how it builds from this simple beginning to something approaching a spiritual declaration, with Elvis's voice growing more passionate and the arrangement expanding to include gospel-influenced backing vocals and a stirring orchestral accompaniment. Camden albums occupied an interesting place in Elvis's discography. Their budget status, usually selling for less than half the price of his regular albums, meant they received less critical attention and promotion, allowing overlooked performances like Sing You Children to remain hidden treasures known primarily to dedicated fans rather than casual listeners. What's particularly fascinating about this track is its timing. Recorded in 1968 and released on this Camden compilation in 1970, it appeared during a period of intense social upheaval in America. Against a backdrop of war protests, civil rights struggles, and generational conflict, Elvis's heartfelt plea for harmony and understanding takes on added resonance, suggesting a social consciousness not always evident in his more commercial releases. Elvis's upbringing in the Pentecostal church profoundly influenced his musical sensibilities, and Sing You Children demonstrates how he could bring that spiritual intensity to seemingly simple material. The song's message about the power of music to unite people across differences connects directly to Elvis's most deeply held beliefs about his art, making this overlooked Camden track a surprisingly personal statement from an artist often hidden behind a carefully managed image. Number 4. Almost, from Almost in Love. Have you ever felt the exquisite pain of almost finding love? Few singers could capture that emotion as perfectly as Elvis does on Almost, a no-go track from the 1970 Camden release, Almost in Love. Originally recorded for his 1966 film Paradise, Hawaiian Style, but omitted from the original soundtrack album, this ballad is Elvis's remarkable gifts as an interpretive singer. The song begins with a spare, elegant arrangement featuring tasteful strings and gentle percussion before Elvis enters with one of his most controlled, nuanced vocal performances. What makes this recording special is his masterful phrasing, the way he lingers on certain words and rushes others, creating a conversational quality that perfectly conveys the lyric sense of regret and longing. Camden albums, like Almost in Love, served a unique commercial purpose in Elvis's career. priced significantly below his standard releases, they made his music accessible to fans with limited resources, while also providing an outlet for material that might not fit the commercial direction of his major albums. This business strategy had the unintended artistic benefit of preserving performances like Almost that might otherwise have remained in the vaults. Elvis biographer Peter Gorilnik has observed that Elvis's most affecting ballad performances reveal a vulnerability at odds with his public image as a confident, sometimes cocky performer. Almost perfectly illustrates this quality, with Elvis laying bare the pain of missed romantic connections in a way that suggests personal familiarity with such experiences. What's particularly interesting about this track is how it bridges different eras in Elvis's career. Recorded during his movie period, but released after his 1968 comeback, it connects the often underrated vocal subtlety of his film work with the emotional directness that characterized his return to live performance, offering a more complete picture of Elvis as an artist than either period typically receives in critical assessments. Number 3. Beyond the Reef, from Elvis Sings Flaming Star. Can a song transport you to another place in time? That's exactly what happens with Elvis's hauntingly beautiful rendition of Beyond the Reef Fadzungo track. From the 1969 Camden release, Elvis Sings Flaming Star. Originally recorded during sessions for his 1962 film Girls, 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 but left unreleased until this budget compilation, the song shanks Elvis's deep affinity for Hawaiian music. From the opening notes of the steel guitar, Beyond the Reef creates an atmosphere of tropical melancholy that perfectly complements the song's theme of separation and longing. Elvis delivers the lyrics with remarkable restraint and sensitivity, demonstrating his often overlooked ability to inhabit different musical traditions with complete authenticity. His pronunciation of Hawaiian place names reveals careful attention to detail, honoring the culture that inspired the song. Camden albums occupied a curious place in Elvis's discography. Their budget status meant they sometimes received less critical attention than his major releases, yet they often contained performances equal to or surpassing those on his more expensive albums. Elvis Sings Flaming Star, priced at just $1.98 when released, exemplifies this quality. Elvis's connection to Hawaiian music ran deep throughout his career, from Blue Hawaii to his groundbreaking Aloha from Hawaii concert. The island's culture and music repeatedly inspired some of his most committed performances. Beyond the Reef represents perhaps his most subtle engagement with this tradition, eschewing tourist cliches in favor of genuine emotional connection to the material. What makes this recording particularly special is how it contradicts the prevailing narrative about Elvis's movie period. Critics often dismiss his 1960s film recordings as cynical, commercial fodder, yet Beyond the Reef demonstrates how moments of genuine artistry emerged even within this commercially motivated context. The song's belated appearance on a budget Camden release allowed listeners to appreciate its qualities separate from its film origins, revealing the serious musician sometimes obscured by Elvis's Hollywood commitments. Number 2, My Little Friend, from You'll Never Walk Alone. Have you ever heard a song so tender it brings tears to your eyes? When Camden released You'll Never Walk Alone in 1971, few recognized the emotional power of My Little Friend, a song originally recorded for Elvis's film Stay Away, Joe, but omitted from the original soundtrack album. This gentle ballad about a parent's love for a child reveals a vulnerability rarely heard in Elvis's more commercial releases. What makes this performance so affecting is the transparent sincerity in Elvis's voice. Free from his usual vocal mannerisms, he delivers the simple, heartfelt lyrics with a directness that suggests personal connection to the material. The arrangement supports this intimacy perfectly, with a spare acoustic guitar accompaniment that allows every nuance of Elvis's interpretation to reach the listener. Camden albums like You'll Never Walk Alone played an important role in preserving aspects of Elvis's artistry that might otherwise have been lost. While his major releases increasingly focused on contemporary material with hit single potential, these budget compilations often featured performances that took to his versatility and emotional range, including quiet, introspective songs like My Little Friend that didn't fit his more commercial image. Elvis historian Alana Nash has noted that tracks like My Little Friend reveal the family man aspect of Elvis's personality that received relatively little attention in his publicity materials. While his public image often emphasized his sexuality or rebellious qualities, this song connects to his deep love for family, particularly ironic, given that it appeared on this Camden release in 1971, the year his relationship with Priscilla was beginning to unravel. What's perhaps most remarkable about this track is how it contradicts the narrative of artistic decline often applied to Elvis's movie period. Recorded in 1968, when critics argued he had lost his way artistically, My Little Friend demonstrates that Elvis remained capable of deeply affecting performances even during his most commercially compromised era, a truth that might have remained hidden had this Camden release not rescued the song from obscurity. Number 1. Gentle on My Mind, from Let's Be Friends. Did you know Elvis Presley recorded one of the most thoughtful versions of Gentle on My Mind ever made? When Camden released Let's Be Friends in 1970, buried among movie songs was Elvis's remarkable interpretation of John Hartford's modern classic, a performance that revealed dimensions of Elvis's artistry rarely displayed on his major releases. What immediately distinguishes Elvis's version is its thoughtful restraint. Rather than overpowering the song with his famous voice, he approaches it with unusual delicacy, allowing the poetic lyrics about freedom and wanderlust to take center stage. The arrangement supports this approach perfectly, with tasteful acoustic guitars and subtle backing vocals, creating an atmosphere of contemplative warmth. Camden albums occupied a strange position in Elvis's discography. Their budget status meant they received less critical attention than his major releases, yet they sometimes contained his most interesting interpretive work, including this version of Gentle on My Mind, which many fans discovered years or even decades after its release on this affordable compilation. Elvis recorded this song in 1969, shortly after his successful comeback and return to live performance. This timing gives the track particular resonance, as the lyrics about maintaining independence while cherishing connection seem to mirror Elvis's own situation, reconnecting with audiences while attempting to assert greater control over his artistic direction after years of formulaic films. What makes this performance especially fascinating is how it contradicts simplistic views of Elvis as merely a rock and roll rebel or Vegas showman. His thoughtful, nuanced interpretation of Hartford's contemplative lyrics reveals a depth and subtlety that challenges easy categorization, suggesting an artist far more complex than his public image indicated. That this revelatory performance appeared on a budget Camden release rather than a major album speaks volumes about how Elvis's most interesting works sometimes escaped mainstream attention. Could these hidden Camden gems actually represent Elvis Presley at his most authentic? Is it possible the true Elvis was hiding in plain sight all along, not on his gold records or major albums, but on these affordable releases that brought his music to everyday Americans who couldn't afford premium prices?